Hey, what's up, guys? A little bit of change in scenery here. As I'm in college now, first week has gone by and it's been great. So shout out to all the college students who started college last week or this week or maybe even the following week. Shout out to all you guys. I understand the struggle. Super glad that you guys could tune into this video. Super excited to what we're going to get into today, as this is the third video in a series that I'm calling Identity, Why Do We Exist? And it's all about finding our identity in Christ, what it means to be a human, why are we here on this earth, and then what our purpose is here. In the first video, we talked about how, based on the Bible, our identity is a son or a daughter of God. That is our identity, and our purpose on earth, why we exist, is to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. So if you want to dive into that deeper, you can check the first video. The second video I posted was on community. And the point of that video, this one and the following one, is basically talking about 3 ways in which we can come to terms with what we talked about in the first one. What does that mean? What I mean by that is I understand that sometimes when we go from a life of trying to find our identity in other things, right? To find, our worth in something that is material based or a person or something like that, from all of a sudden hearing this, or you may already have heard this time and time again in church, but it finally hits you and God has been working in you. I want to provide 3 ways practically in which we can come to terms with our identity and live like that. Live in the fullness of life that God has promised us. Live with every spiritual blessing like Ephesians 2 talks about. Live with every spiritual blessing. But in 2 Peter it talks about how we have been given everything to live this life. We have been given everything, right? Our lives are not meant to be, constantly, about comparison or competing or whatever. It's living a life as a son or a daughter of Jesus, right? So today I want to talk about spending time with God and how through spending time with God, through knowing your Creator, you can know who you are. And we're going to read a really cool story. It's in Daniel chapter 10. So if you want to flip with me there, and I'm going to read from Daniel chapter 10, verse 1 to 11. So follow along in your own Bibles, okay? Daniel 10:1 says this: In the 3rd year of King Cyrus of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. Don't know if I got that right. Disclaimer. Fancy name. Anyways, the message was true and it was about a great conflict. He understood the message and had understanding of the vision. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 full weeks. I didn't eat any rich food. No meat or wine entered my mouth, and I didn't put any oil on my body until the 3 weeks were over. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up, and there was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of gold from uphalls around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the brilliance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and feet like gleaming of polished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. Verse 7, Only I, Daniel, saw the vision. The men who were with me did not see it, but a great terror fell on them, and they ran and hid. I was left alone, looking at this great vision. No strength was left in me. My face grew deathly pale, and I was powerless. I heard the words he said, and then when I heard them, I fell into a deep sleep, with my face to the ground. Suddenly a hand touched me, and set me shaking on my hands and knees. Verse 11, he said to me, Daniel, you are a man treasured by God. We're going to stop there. And the story continues on, but just to kind of explain what's going on here, and then, how does this relate to what we're talking about? What we're seeing here is some theologians either think it's an angel or it's an appearance of Jesus, of Christ, prior to the New Testament, which is called the Christophany, which is basically, there are several times in the Old Testament where we believe that maybe Jesus appeared in a form to people in the Old Testament, and that is called the Christophany, but separate and not the same as like Jesus came on earth, New Testament stuff. This is an Old Testament appearance. That's what's going on here. Daniel is having this revelation. Some would say that it's an angel. It doesn't really matter. Really, what we got to get to the point is what's being said, at least in this part of the story, because this is a deep story. If you want to read it, it's really cool. I would suggest it. But right now we're going to focus from 1 to 11. So how does this relate, and what am I trying to say with this? Well, you have to notice a few things. The first thing is this, and this is where we see the importance of spending time with God. In verses 1 through 4, we see an explanation where it says that Daniel was mourning, fasting, for 3 full weeks. He was doing what we would call the Daniel fast now. He didn't even take a shower. He didn't clean himself. It was an intense fast, and he was mourning for his people, praying for 3 full weeks. He was in the presence of God for 3 full weeks. Prior to this, we understand that Daniel himself prayed 3 times a day. So this is a man who spent time with God. This is a man who knew the presence of God. He lived it. So not only was he doing his 3 times a day prayer, but for these past 3 weeks, he was going on a fast. He was going the extra mile to separate himself from everything else in the world, to spend time with God. That's what we have to understand first, okay? First thing, spending time with God. Second thing we see is that in verse 7, Daniel saw the vision. But the 2 other men he was with, it says, they could not see the vision, and a terror fell on them, and they ran away. Daniel could see the vision, but the 2 other guys couldn't, but they felt it, and they ran and they fled. And the third thing is in verse 11, where it says, Daniel, you are a man treasured by God. So we understand that he was spending time with Christ. Okay, he knew he abided in the presence of God. Okay, now when this vision appeared, what had happened was this: because Daniel already had a relationship. Daniel had sat in the presence. Daniel could recognize God. That when an angel appeared, sent by God, appeared to Daniel, he could recognize what was happening. The other 2 guys couldn't recognize any. They had no idea what was going on. They could feel it, but they didn't know what to do, and they ran away. So what I'm trying to say to you is this: do you recognize when Jesus is moving in your midst? Do you recognize him in your daily walk? Can you see him? Can you feel him? Are you led by the Spirit? How do you do these things? How all these things happen? By spending time with God. See, Daniel was in the presence of God prior to this, and he was the only one out of the 3 men in that place right there that could recognize what was happening. Now, this is how it relates to identity, and what I want to get across to you guys is this. As he saw the vision, it continued on, and this angel said in verse 11, Daniel, you are a man treasured by God. And then after this, the angel gives him this entire explanation of this and that, and just basically gives Daniel this amazing word and commissions him to pray and be a leader in his kingdom and all this stuff. But what I'm trying to get at is this. Daniel spent time with God. Because of that, he could recognize God. Because he could do that, he was able to hear what God had to say about him. The first thing that the angel said to him was, you are a man treasured by God. And the only reason why that was possible was because Daniel could recognize what was happening in his midst. He knew what the presence of God felt like. He knew when the Lord was moving. He said that before everything else that he needed to tell Daniel. That was the first thing. That's how he addressed him, and that's how the Lord addresses you today. You are treasured by God. But if you want to experience this and know that, and you want to come to terms with that, you guys are going to have to spend time with him. Spending time with God is the key. Guys, spend time with God. Recognize him. Live a lifestyle where you are able to recognize the presence of God, where you understand what the Lord has said about you. Why? Because in your private time, the Lord told you what he said about you, and you can bring that out into the public. And that's what happens post this vision, where Daniel knows who he is commissioned, is able to live the rest of his life out from there. But guys, spending time with God is the key here. He was praying, fasting for 3 weeks, and he was able to recognize and be the only one out of the 3 men, and was able to receive that joyous word that says, Daniel, you are a man treasured by God. Imagine how powerful that would have been. This angel himself is saying, you are treasured by God. Guess what? God can speak that truth into your heart, but you have to let him. You have to create time. Guys, spend time with the one who made you. You know, a toy maker knows their toys inside and out, how the electronics work. Why? Because they made the toy. You know? God made you. He knows you inside and out. The only one that has a right to tell you who you are and why you exist is him. Nothing else, no media, no person. Spend time with him and you'll understand who you are. He will download into you. He will renew your mind. He will give you an understanding of who he says you are. And you are treasured. You are a treasured man and woman of God. So I hope this was a blessing to you guys. I'm going to be posting my next one in a couple days, probably next week. Thank you guys so much for watching. And remember, community. Plugging yourself into a place where you can thrive, being in community with others. First way to come to terms with your identity. Second way, spending time with God. Knowing your creator, knowing the one who made you is how you're going to know who you are. He has the blueprint. Just accept it. And the third one we'll talk about in the next video. But thank you guys so much for watching. Leave comments down below if you need a prayer request or you want to highlight something. And feel free to share this video. And I'm going to put my Instagram in the description below, and you can follow me on Instagram as well. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. God bless.